The soldiers huddled in the trenches of red earth. Their khaki shorts and desert fatigues set them apart from normal armies. Trained and accustomed to the heat, they had adapted to their environment and thrown off colonial designs of war dress long ago. Hard as nails, with wills of iron, they would never back down nor look back. They all knew that sunrise was only a few hours away, and when the light hit them, they were dead men. Morale was at an all-time low, with every one of their allies abandoning them for fear and cowardice. A kangaroo bounded over a trench in the eerie silence, and the soldier below almost had a heart attack. The silence was unnerving. A gunshot rang out, breaking the silence as a sniper took a shot. The thud of it impacting the earth could be heard. "Commander, we are completely outnumbered. Have a look at this." The commander wandered over and put his eyes up to the thermal scope peering over the trench. From horizon to horizon were tanks, armored vehicles, and troops making camp. It looked like a small city. The enemy's complete superiority of numbers made them arrogant, and they did not even conceal or defend their presence. The place was lit up like a small city, and apart from snipers, they were out of range to engage. The commander shook his head and pulled out a cigarette as he turned his back to the enemy's camp and leaned against the trench. He slumped down in resignation, knowing his entire platoon were about to die. As he lit his cigarette, the short flash of flint spark played tricks with his eyes as a black behemoth loomed before him. From the darkness he watched as wraiths of black took forms like demons, walking out of the black mist, slow and silent. He watched transfixed, thinking he was going mad, and was seeing the underworld reaching out to grab him. His lips parted, and pure fear took hold, as the dust plumed out silently from each of the demon's footfalls. His cigarette fell from his lips in an uncontrollable reaction, as he realized. He choked back welling emotion, his lips quivering, and tears began to form, as he stood up and saluted. The other soldiers noticed his reaction and turned to look, as they too welled with emotion. Today was a good day. The demons before them emerged from the darkness in unison, striding over the trenches in silence, their giant forms becoming clear as thousands of flares shot into the sky like it was Guy Fawkes Day. They exploded with the incandescence of 1,000 suns and lit up the battlefield like it was daytime. The unmistakable symbol of the Kiwi emblazoned on their shoulder pads, and the trident was etched in their chests. If a man had dreamed of machines of war, these would be the end-all and be-all. Standing 2 stories tall and sheathed in heavy armor that could stop the shell from a battleship's main cannon, they looked like the Imperial Knights of old. Everyone watched as 50 mechs, each sporting a unique design, stopped in a line formation in front of the trenches. As the flares faded, they all turned their floodlights on, and a booming voice came from an unknown source. "Let them have it, boys." At that moment, missiles streamed from each of the mechs as they simultaneously unloaded 50,000 rounds each from their Vindicator 20mm autocannons. Even a fly could not find a space between the rounds to escape. The horizon was set ablaze as tanks and men ran for their lives. Shell casings hit the ground and piled up taller than a man, as the mechs continued to unleash God Almighty hell. The sound was deafening. Then, in unison, they all ran out of ammo and many clicks could be heard as firing pins hit the air. All of a sudden, all the flashlights were turned off, and in the darkness that followed, all that could be seen was the red glow from melting gun barrels. Then, all of a sudden, each mech detached their weapons and dropped them to the ground. Missile packs and heavy guns that should only ever be mounted to tanks hit the ground with thuds, discarded and no longer of any use. The enemy was regrouping for a counteroffensive, but it was too little, too late, as the smiles of each of the mech's pilots could almost be felt. Now that the fireworks show was over, it was time for the real combat. Each mech, with its humanoid appearance, sheathed in armor, did exactly as you would have wished, and reached over their shoulders to draw close combat swords. Each one reaching 6 meters in length. But just as they unsheathed, a high-pitched whirring hum could be heard as the blades began to glow an odd green hue, like a low flame. Then it intensified as they began to drip a liquid that on contact with the ground flashed and sparked before turning the earth to a glass-like substance. And before anyone could catch their breath, the entire mech unit charged at over 300 kilometers an hour at a full run towards the enemy line. Death-curdling screams could be heard as screeches of metal and clangs erupted. Flashes of green could be seen as swords created glowing arcs through the air, cleaving tanks in half like a knife through butter. Gunfire bounced off them like nothing more than light rain, and true terror was felt as not a single man was left standing. This war would have no prisoners and no survivors. The soldiers came up from the trenches and watched in awe as their enemy was eviscerated, like it was nothing. Flashes, explosions, and chunks of armored vehicles were flying everywhere like a tornado was ripping through the area. Captain, did you see their weapons? What in God's name was that? Yeah, I know what you're thinking. How on earth did the Kiwis get those things? And to see a real-life plasma blade in action? Unbelievable. But you missed the most vital point. Did you notice that symbol on their chest? The trident. That alone should have made the enemy surrender on the spot without question or hesitation. But for them to come into the open like this, it can only mean one thing. This world is about to change. God help us all. The kraken has awoken.
Like and subscribe and hit that share button.